Hello everyone again. So I shall start my continuation. So the first thing I want to talk about is I showed you how I got the box volume and shape roughly using that Basebox Pro software, and also just suggestion from the website selling that speaker. So the reason why the mid-range speaker, the Fountek one, requires an enclosure and a bit more thought put into the volume of that enclosure, and the high-range speaker, I didn't even consider that, is because the high-range speaker is already an enclosed system. It's a self-contained unit. High frequency range doesn't need its own enclosure. Okay, going back to basic speaker theory, the purpose of your box is to provide to do something with the energy on the return stroke of that speaker cone. So you have your basic ported speaker box and your sealed speaker box. What your ported speaker box does is allow that return energy of the speaker cone going in and out. There's a whole other phase there that it's making use of. It inverts that phase in a bass reflex tube and gives you that energy, that sound wave in sync with the speaker's front cone, essentially. Okay, let me roll back even further. If you just have a speaker out in the open with no enclosure, what's going to happen is when that speaker drives forward, you're going to get a positive pressure wave, but as soon as that speaker moves backward, that positive pressure is going to be created behind the speaker, and those two pressure waves are going to intermix with each other because there's nothing blocking that interaction. So the enclosure provides a physical barrier between those two pressure waves and sides of the cone. So the enclosure is doing that job, and it can do it in different ways. A sealed enclosure, which is what I'm doing here, will just completely contain that backside cone pressure wave, so you're not hearing it at all. It's not being introduced into the environment, it's being contained. And the only other major variable there is the volume of that. The volume of that will affect how easily that cone can move, because that volume of air contained in that box is now like a spring. It's an air spring. So that's sort of the point of getting that 5 litre value. It gives a relatively flat response for that speaker I have. But the tweeter, as long as you sort of contain and don't let that negative side of the cone, there is no real negative side of the cone on the tweeter anyway, because it's literally just a magnet pretty much. Anyway, that's way more information than you needed. The next thing I wanted to go on about was and I've been thinking about this design. One thing I need to consider is I want to put a veneer on the outside. All the veneer is just a thin layer of actual wood, so it has all the actual grain, and you just glue it on pretty much. So what I want to do is push this baffle plate out a little bit more, so that the veneer is sort of trapped behind this, and it will look a bit better. So what I'm going to do for that is edit the sketch for starters. So just selecting this whole outer ring, adding another offset, which it won't let me. Okay, so there's already an offset. So I can add an offset to an offset. Great. Why not? I do. Come on, let me select the whole inner. So I'm selecting the inner original square again. There we go. Oops. So now I'm making a completely separate offset. So we had 16 originally. So I want, say, the veneer is only like, I think it was 0.3 millimeters thick, which is tiny. So to have the outer edge of the baffle in line with that, but I want the baffle to go over that by, let's say 4 millimeters. So that's not going to affect anything because what I added is sort of in addition to everything, to my selections. I haven't edited the selections that I've made a list from. What do I mean by that? So if I edit this, there we go, I can select that. So see how I'm adding part of the selection to this. So that's now made this have that additional offset, and it should all apply no. Okay, so the chamfer here didn't work properly. So I have to, let's have a look at that. That looks pretty neat. But I think I prefer it. Yeah, I prefer it with both edges. So I think I might cut, this is nitpicking, but I might cut this down by maybe 2 millimeters. Play it safe and I'll go to 3 millimeters. No, you're not even going to see that, are you? 2 millimeters. Notice all this changes automatically. That's the wonders of parametric design. Another thing I'm going to do is I'm not going to chamfer these, I'm going to radius these. You wouldn't bother with this if you're sort of doing this if you're cutting these shapes out by hand, but I have a CNC machine, so it will easily sort of do this for me. 2 millimeters, that looks pretty nice. And I'll hide that sketch again. So that's one thing I fixed. The other thing I need to fix is I need to make this rear plate inset and not outset. So I will, where are you? I'll edit this selection and not bother with these. And now I have to edit these sections. I can just select these and I press M to move it by an additional 16 millimeters. So now this plate is going to be inset inside of all this. So now what I'm going to do is I need to make a jamb for this door to screw into and to make a good seal. Another thing to consider is when I add this jamb, it's going to limit the volume a little bit. So that extra bit of volume I added earlier, yeah, this will hopefully be taken into account all that. So I'm just going to, I don't want to edit the sketch because that'll probably change my, actually, no, I won't bother editing it. So what I'm going to do is, I'm selecting this door and I'm going to create a, actually let's just go into sketch mode. I've double clicked to select this room and I'm going to make an offset by however much. Now this jam is probably going to interfere with these, so I'm going to have to push these down a bit, but I'll worry about that later. So I'm just going to do 22 millimeters. It's going to come out 16 millimeters. Once again, I want a new body. Put this back into bloody perspective. So we now have a jam in here. And I'm going to edit the sketch for these holes. Now I think that's killed off. I had a parameter set where this and this were a set value, but I don't have that anymore. Here. Oh. I think it was the same 45. Good enough. There we go. Beautiful. So now we have something that looks a bit more respectable. And I might change the size of that chamfer just to 10 millimeters. So it gives this edge here a bit thicker, which will make it a bit easier to work with. And of course now I have to move this again. Where are you? There you are. I'm gonna guess 6 millimeters. That looks good enough. So yes, that design looks pretty good. Next thing to work on, I shall pause right here and get that all set up. Alright, I'm back. I've renamed the parts and I've done a copy of it just to work on the design, see how it looks before I go ahead and document all this, record it, whatever. So I decided to get rid of these edges, so I can just select them and delete. It would probably be cleaner if I just deselect it in the original history. I push this out back to its where I originally had it. I change these radiuses to, I think it was 6. I'll probably get a bit more. 8. And a big change, which I think I will just tack onto the side of this. Not 100% sure of the angle, but I guess anything will really do. hate when the angles don't match up. Let me figure some of this stuff out. Just bear with me for a minute. There we go. Now this is going to join onto these sides, so I've got to just get rid of them. And the jam. Which I probably should rename. There we go. Just that sort of profile looks a bit nicer in my opinion for a ceiling mount speaker. Alright, next thing I needed to change. These holes need to be spaced apart because there's going to be a bar going here to support it. So I'm just going to delete this actually, this constraint, and do a constraint base from here. What I probably should do is do them vertical. Actually, oh, there's plenty of room there. I'll push these out to 40. That. Hey, when it does that. One of these is over constrained. Nope, still doing it. There we go. So the next thing to do, which I'm just going to put it in for the model purpose, just to see how it looks, is the sort of support bar. So I'll start another sketch. Somewhere around here. And we'll do this symmetrically. Next thing I'll do, just to show you how this looks, is to change the materials on these things and rename this stuff. So I want the appearance for these. Full load. Oh, here we go. So just a generic wood, solid ones are best. That's like a 3D texture, so it'll be quite evenly spaced throughout the whole thing. Finished, and I had this before. And oops, paint, powder coated rough black for the front baffle. I plan to use like a brushed aluminium for the support. So that's roughly how we're looking right now. So this looks far more refined. I'll just save this. So if I go onto your render, you have sort of a slightly better view of it. But I will not waste too much time on that. So the next thing I'll do is verify the sizes of these holes. I'm measuring with a tape measure. I'll just grab it again because I can't remember the values. So the size in total was 180 millimeters, so this actually needs to go up a bit. So that's still within the confines. And the mounting hole, which I can't really do by hand too easily. It's about 148 millimeters. So they're pretty close, they're good enough, and this was alright. So that looks pretty nice. The next step that I was going to take was to design the mounting posts and speakers, but I'll do that, I'll spare you all the farting around. It's pretty basic stuff.